I think we should go ahead, blast off, and talk about this. So, first of all, chat, I want to talk before we actually go over the new infograph about the resurgence of calls for MasterCard and Visa. I want to talk a little bit about how this is an issue that is affecting content creators that you guys know and like. I know a lot of folks already are familiar with, just generally speaking, artists and adult developers getting censored because of payment processors. But I want to reiterate something that I talked about earlier this week, which is the censorship of Ember. So Ember Talks, who I think a lot of folks here know, love, remember, watch a lot of as well alongside me because she's a fellow VorTuber. So Ember was recently, she recently had some of her IRL posts removed from Subscribestar. Now, Subscribestar, admittedly, from what I've seen, has had a policy for a significant period of time where they block real-life nudity, or rather they block IRL adult content more specifically. But it's sort of obfuscated. It's not very obvious to see on any of the Subscribestar.adult website that this is the case at all. And so Ember has been dealing with sort of the runaround of what happens when a platform is not very clear and explicit about what their supposed policies are. So in this case, what Ember has said is that she has been she had some IRL content removed from Subscribestar and was asked instead to go to another website that Subscribestar runs called Riot Models, which is sort of like OnlyFans or Fansly. And I was chatting with Ember earlier yesterday, and she hasn't heard any additional follow-up from Subscribestar about her situation at all. She's kind of been left on the lurch hanging. And Subscribestar has said that per its payment processor's rules, real-life nudity is not allowed on Subscribestar. My impression when I dug into this on stream a couple days ago, chat, was that Subscribestar essentially, it seemed to originally have actually allowed folks to post IRL adult content, and then over time that seemed to be rolled back, and they implemented like pushing all that content to Riot Models. That's my understanding of the situation. There might be more to it. It might actually be the case after all that Subscribestar.adult has always had more of a please don't post IRL content on our page kind of vibe, on our website kind of vibe. But that's my understanding of the situation, and it does seem to me, regardless, like when I was looking through Subscribestar's like terms of service prohibited content stuff, that up until September it wasn't very clear about like whether, for example, like, you know, softcore IRL content could be posted on Subscribestar. What I mean by that is literally just like a photo of like, you know, one's like tits exposed or something. I didn't really see a lot of clear clarification from Subscribestar about that until September. That's when the change happened. The fact you had to dig through Twitter to find it was insane. Yeah, I mean, it's just not very obvious. I have a theory. I have a working theory about this. I think what happens is, I think Subscribestar is looking for people like Ember who are hybrid adult content creators. I think they're looking for people who are like VTubers but also might want to post like tit pics, and they're not being super obvious about the fact that like posting your exposed tits is banned on Subscribestar.adult. And so I think instead what Subscribestar is trying to do is sit there and say, look, come to our site. We're not going to be fully clear about what our policy is in IRL nudity. And then if we have to pull your content, we hit you with we suggest opening an account on Riot Models, which just so happens to be a Subscribestar website instead. I think it's high key. This is just like a theory of mine. I think it's a bit of a bait and switch that they're pulling. I think they're like trying to get people onto Subscribestar.adult and then be like, oh, by the way, like if we say some of your account's not good for the site, you can go ahead and go on to Riot Models instead. I think they're like kind of not being super upfront about it for that reason. So that's my working theory about why that's happening. I think Subscribestar needs to be more openly obvious and honest about what its policy is, Because for creators like Ember, they're going to see Subscribestar and they're going to say, oh, like this is the alternative to Patreon that is traditionally less censorious. I'm going to go on there instead of Fansly. And for a lot of folks, unfortunately, this is not going to be a good alternative for them if they're posting IRL content. Yeah, hope a user gets entrenched in one service and then also hook them for the other after however long. That's my working theory. It might be the case that Subscribestar is just really kind of not thinking through like what message is putting down with its website, but I think more likely that they're trying to just get a wide swath of people into Subscribestar.adult, and then the moment that they catch someone has been in fact posting IRL content, they say like, heads up, you got to go to Riot Models. Just a heads up, because Riot Models is not like Fansly or OnlyFans where it's a very well-known name. It's like one of the more like not really seen or even used like OnlyFans style sites. It's not very popular. It wouldn't work for me, that's for sure. Wouldn't trust them either way personally with obfuscating their rules like that. Yeah, it just should be a lot more obvious. Like they updated the prohibited content section and made it more clear like that like just general live nudity is not allowed on Subscribestar, but still it's like, I don't know guys, it's like it's just like you should be able to be supremely and explicitly upfront about like what the case is with IRL content. That should be something that's like no one has a question that Subscribestar is not for IRL content. So creators like Ember, I'm sure she's not the only one. I'm sure other creators have been tripped up by this issue in the past. And I feel really bad for her because it's a reflection of Subscribestar not being a clear communicator, which really sucks. But I want to also, I said VorTubers, not VorTuber, for a reason. So while obviously this is directly because of payment processor rules and how Subscribestar handles them, there is another VorTuber that was recently impacted by censorship that I want to talk about with you guys. And that is Veracia. Veracia is, for those of you that don't know, I've talked about her a little bit. I think a lot of folks on here probably know who Veracia is because they are folks that are into Vor. They're into VorTubers, and Veracia is one of the bigger VorTubers. She, I would say, pound for pound, she might be the most popular VorTuber at the moment. Because I wouldn't really consider Victoria, like Victoria, like got a start and was really connected to the idea of like Giannis and Vor content, but Victoria sort of branched off from the VorTuber space. Whereas Veracia is like, all of her content is Vor, right? Like she is a VorTuber, like fundamentally. In the same way that Ember is a VorTuber, like the content revolves around Vor. And Veracia is probably the most popular VorTuber at this point. I think there's a little bit of a jostling that might occur between like Ember, and then there's also always Muzu. But I would say for all intents and purposes culturally, and in terms of like when people think VorTuber, who do they think of? They think of Veracia. And so Veracia, she has been getting banned a lot recently, like a real lot. So if we look at her streamer bans page, because she's partner, so there's we can track her on here. She's had 5 total bans. Her last ban was 5 days ago, and her longest ban was 7 days. So let me go through her ban history a little bit. So, hey Demonia, how are you? So, the first ban, the very first ban that Veracia experienced was December 10th, 2024. She was unbanned after 19 hours. Then, February 16th, 2025, she was banned for a whole week. Then, September 16th, she was unbanned after a day. And then, September 27th, she was unbanned after 3 days. And then October 27th, 1 month after the last ban, she was banned again and unbanned after 2 days. So to put this in perspective, guys, basically in the last, 12 months, Veracia has gotten all of her bans. Basically in the last 12 months, all of Veracia's bans have occurred in some shape or form. And it started with 1 in December and 1 in February. But to put this into perspective for you guys, literally in the past 2 months now, the past 2 months, like the majority of her bans have occurred. So in the past 2 months, we have seen her September 16th ban, her September 27th ban, and then her October 27th ban. Now, after one of these bans, I forget which one, it was the one where I subbed in for her on Ember's talk show, or on Ember's like game show that she did, the Jeopardy one. I remember at the time, Veracia basically said that, oh, this is just like something that happens. It's not really like specifically targeted towards her content. I think her feeling was basically that like in some shape or form, she got like kind of AI mass reported targeted, I think is basically what happened, or there was like a false positive of some shape or form. Let me actually find the specifics in that conversation that I was part of so I can say it correctly, because I joined the group chat that we were all in for the Jeopardy game. And then Veracia in that group chat explained what exactly had happened. So let me actually get it up right now. But yeah, basically what ended up happening for her was she was kind of like, it happens, not a big deal. Which ban was it again? Let me actually double check here, guys. I have so many group chats and DMs. I'm like, which one is the correct one? I might have accidentally unjoined it. Actually, I think I did as a joke. Wait, no. Am I still part of it? No, I unjoined it as a joke. We made a vor joke. We made a vor joke that Ember was eating me. And then I left the Discord chat after she ate me. So there you go. That's what's happening in Anna's world. So I'm not part of the group chat. But yeah, at the time she basically said like, you know, like this happens. It's not really a big deal. It's basically scuffed it, like kind of chalked it up to more of a false positive instead of necessarily being reflective of her. And that was, forget which one of these bans, but it was one of the September bans. It was when it was during Ember's subathon. So probably September 16th, probably that one. But then we've seen multiple bans since then. We've seen multiple bans from September, October, and so the lion's share of bans that Veracia's experience has happened basically in the past 2 months or so. So this does have me a little bit more cause for concern, because it's one thing if there's a false positive. It's another thing if like you're doing content and you're like repeatedly getting banned, like, and it's not just 1 day, it's 3 days, 2 days, like something is kind of up. Something is kind of up. I'm not really sure exactly what's going on. I don't have a direct link to Veracia. Like I'm not directly connected with her. I don't really feel comfortable like poking friends and being like, "Can you give me information from Veracia?" Because there's just like, it's a little too much to get into here, but it's just not really appropriate. But we're not like really professionally connected, is what I'm saying, and I don't really want to bug her in a journalistic sense for some good reasons. So instead, I don't really know specifically because I don't have that line of connection. I can't get that line of connection. But it is a cause for concern. Like at the end of the day, I know everyone has their own preferences about VorTubers. Everyone has their own personal feelings about VorTubers. There's some VorTubers people love. There's some VorTubers people feel about. And Veracia, I think no one really says this out loud, but Veracia definitely just, as far as VorTubers go, she is actually somewhat divisive. Like people have different feelings about her. They have feelings about her content, whether they love her content, whether they about her content, and like what she represents for Twitch. Like people have a lot of feelings about the fact that like, you know, people have feelings about VorTubers, and Veracia, you know, is often the lightning rod for that kind of attention because she's considered the most popular one. But at the end of the day, when I'm seeing multiple bans happen to a VorTuber, that's cause for concern, because Veracia's content is not anything in particular that is like she's been fine for the most part over the year, and she's not really someone that like takes significant risk in terms of changing like her design or perspective. She's not someone that like is introducing stuff into her streams that is like particularly at like risky compared to what she's already doing. So having Veracia get banned multiple times like this, it is cause for concern. It's not something I would encourage VorTubers to panic about. It's not something I would encourage yourselves to panic about. Thank you for the lyrics, by the way, folks. But it's just something is up. Something is up, and I don't know what it is. But I hope this shows to folks that are in the Vor community that they should have the antenna up on this issue. They should be keeping an eye out, because if Erasure is getting hit with these bans multiple times, there's various conclusions that one might come to, and those conclusions might range from, by the way, my music stopped. What's going on with that? Those conclusions, can we pin this, by the way, mods? Lurk and lurk redeem. Wait. Lurk redeem and lurk if listening. Music. There we go. Okay. It is cause for concern if someone that's working in our niche is one of the most popular folks in our niche. Yeah, oh yeah, I know you could see the video animation. I was setting it up. It is cause for concern if like someone in our niche is getting banned multiple times like this. It's just cause for concern. It's not something anyone should panic about necessarily, but I hope it shows to folks here that two things are happening. One, there actually is some more attention being placed from Twitch Trust and Safety on fetish VTubers. Or two, the trust, like the team, like the actual structure of Twitch itself, the infrastructure that is sort of the bedrock for Twitch is getting more prone to these sort of like reports happening. Streamers are more likely to get dinged if these all are just false positives. They're more likely to get dinged just simply because, you know, something about the system is catching them. The system's being gamed to get, you know, a VTuber or content creator banned for a bit, especially if they're doing fetish content. Like basically either the systems at play with Twitch and how it identifies and moderates content are becoming weaker, the actual literal technical infrastructure, or something is up with fetish content and something is up with like sexually suggestive content with Twitch that's being flagged through Voracia. That is my two conclusions. Now, I don't really know. I don't think it's too much cause for concern unless Voracia or another VorTuber comes out and says like something is going on. I am saying this not as a VorTuber. I'm saying this as like someone who's looking at this pattern of behavior, and as chat identified, there is a pattern of behavior happening from Twitch to Voracia that's unfair to her. I don't know what that potentially will mean long term for us as VorTubers. I just don't know. I don't know if this is, again, a bunch of false positives or not, but I do see a pattern. It could be infrastructure. If that's the case, that'll likely get worse after the recent layoffs. That, Pat, is exactly what I was worried about. If this is a question of infrastructure, if it is a question of the way Twitch works, causing a situation where VorTubers like Voracia or anyone that's doing like fetishy ASMR is going to get dinged, like that's an issue. And so I'm stressing this, and I'm stressing what happened to Ember, because I want folks to understand that this problem is not going away, and that this problem is impacting the communities that you're into, that you're part of, that you're interested in, the content that you like. You know, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is censorship is going to come into your neck of the woods one way or another, and it doesn't really matter if like at the end of the day, whether like there was a secret policy at Subscribestar that no one knew about, or like Voracia is just getting a bunch of false positives, at the end of the day, censorship is censorship, right? If you're getting censored, the context of like whether someone is specifically targeting you or not is sort of irrelevant when we're talking about like you lose money, your fans lose access to your content, things like that. If someone is getting censored, that is something that we as a community, as a group of people, need to work carefully to stop and make a fuss about. Bring up the fact that someone is being censored. So again, I would say it's people's livelihoods at stake. Yeah, exactly. And it's not really a question of whether like Twitch is super evil and hates all the VorTubers. It's a question of like, if this happens to Voracia, could it happen to Ember? Could it happen to Avi? Could it happen to me? That's the question. Like, if Voracia is getting hit with false positives, could all of us be hit with false positives? If Voracia is getting hit because Twitch is starting to clamp down on fetish ASMR content, then we're all fucked, you know? So negligent censorship is still censorship. Yeah, exactly. The motivation for the censorship can be no motivation. It can be a technical error, or it can be very specifically because of payment processors, but it's still censorship, and it still makes creators' livelihoods, you know, it still affects their livelihoods. So that's what I would say to folks here. Pay attention to these patterns, because they might start affecting you guys. All right, with my preamble out of the way, because I wanted to do that to flag that with my VorTuber fans, let us talk about why today matters so much. Because today is Resurgence Day. November 1st, we are picking up the phones again. We are calling. We are hitting up the lines saying, MasterCard, Visa, we are not down with what you're doing. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Well, for those of you that forgot, a little while ago, I think it was a couple days ago, really, at this point, I was contacted by someone who was a source familiar with the internal workings at MasterCard, and they basically told me, hey, Anna, here's the situation right now. So MasterCard is, you know, doing its usual seasonal like worker hiring for the holiday season because it's busy season, but they're not hiring additional workers than they normally would, because in their eyes, you know, essentially the message that they got was, we're not hiring additional seasonal workers because we do not think that there's going to be an urgent crisis on our hands. We do not think there's going to be, you know, wall-to-wall calls constantly hitting up our call centers about what's going off the censorship stuff, what's going off MasterCard and Visa and Steam and Itch.io and video games and anime, and why can't I buy, you know, gushing over magical girls on with this one like anime retailer, uwu. Like, they just figured that was not going to be the case. On the other hand, that source also told me that basically internally at MasterCard, they really just wanted this issue to quietly go away. Like, it actually was basically befuddling them that we would care so much about this issue when there are other political issues going on right now. And I believe the phrase was profoundly irritating is the way the source described it. That MasterCard internally found our focus on this issue profoundly irritating. So November 1st, today, is the day to be profoundly irritating. We are going to be profoundly irritating. So, how do we be profoundly irritating? And why do we be profoundly irritating? Well, simply put, if we hit MasterCard and Visa and any other like payment processor company now when it is their busy season, we remind them that there might be a brief lull, there might be a valley where they're not getting as much attention or much calls, but we can ramp it right back up in a heartbeat. This is an issue they cannot ignore. It's not quietly going away. And also reminding them that we can do this. If they're having busy season, if they are forced to spend extra money already on seasonal workers, we can make it really hard for MasterCard to ignore us. We can make it really hard for them to ignore the level to which all of us care heavily about this issue, that this is an issue that is not going away, and that we can put strain on MasterCard's institutions and systems by stressing that this issue is one that affects us, that bothers us. So the goal is to show to MasterCard that we care significantly, so much so that they might need to spend more money in their call centers, that their call centers become flooded with these calls. It affects their business. We want to disrupt. The goal is to disrupt. The goal is to disrupt politely and kindly to the workers working at those call centers, but the goal is to disrupt. Now, I've had folks now and then ask why specifically call these call centers, and it's very simple. It works. It works. It bothers MasterCard. Like, MasterCard gets upset that they're getting so many calls about this. Like I said, the thing that they find profoundly irritating is not a couple articles. The thing they find profoundly irritating is that everyone calls them constantly. That's what bothers them. And if they have to hire more workers, it's more money into the pit of navigating our rage and anger. So that's what it is. Now, again, I want to stress, it's important to be polite. It's important to be respectful. It's important not to rage at a call center worker. You don't want to get on the phone and just start screaming at them. Like, please do not do that. Be like respectful. These call center workers did not choose this policy. They are just doing their job. But unfortunately, MasterCard refuses to budge, and so we do have to call these call centers. So we'll talk a little bit about this wonderful infographic that Dieselbrain put together. I looked over it a little bit briefly before she put it out. It's very, very good. I'll be sharing it a lot. And she talks a little bit about hassling Visa and MasterCard for the holidays, which is ultimately the main goal. So we will be doing this in November through December. We'll be doing this during the holiday season. The goal is to focus on the holiday season. Finally, a way to funnel my profoundly irritating skill set I've developed for years. Now that is the energy I'm looking for. That's the energy I'm looking for. All right, chat. So let's read through this document. So, hassle Visa and MasterCard for the holidays. Visa and MasterCard have continued to crack down on websites and users who host/sell legal adult content. This is particularly important to note because MasterCard and Visa have tried to stress that they're cracking down on illegal adult content, which is not the case. They're cracking down on legal adult content. They're continuing to pressure itch.io, Steam, and other platforms as well. The holiday season is coming up, and internal sources confirm that Visa and MasterCard are not hiring any more than usual for the holidays, a very busy time of the year for credit card call centers. Therefore, this is an opportunity to gum up their call centers and have a greater impact made with a call campaign. I will note that I only heard from MasterCard. I didn't hear from Visa, although I assume that Visa and MasterCard are probably making the same decisions here. I'm positive that it's not a situation where like Visa is hiring a lot of people. I think it's pretty much understood at this point that the call campaign did die down a bit. So here is what we're going to do. As this infographic says, this is an opportunity to gum up their call centers and have a greater impact made of a call campaign. So call both Visa and MasterCard at least once a day, every day. So step 1, contact Visa and MasterCard. We have phone numbers for US and Canada provided. This is a bit more lo-fi, although I want to remind folks that the stoppaypros.neocities and yell at money URL above on the ticker over there has more phone numbers and has more information. Especially Stop Pay Pros on NeoCities is a very good site to check out. It's a site that has a lot of resources and a lot of phone numbers, but this just for this infographic because I think it's especially targeting American, Canadian Blue Sky users and just readers in general. It has these numbers. So step 1, contact Visa and MasterCard. Step 2, choose a style of call. I really like this approach a lot. I think Dieselbrain did a really good job having like this kind of like you can choose 2 pathways sort of thing. So we'll go over both of them. When you make a call, you can try doing a complaint. Complaints communicate the cause and our demands to payment processors. Hi, I'm calling because I'd like to lodge an official complaint. Talking points you can mention with this complaint include PAYPROS pressuring platforms to remove adult content. It is not PAYPROS' right to decide what people can do with their own money. At a time where SNAP and other government benefits are being cut, it is heinous for PAYPROS to attack individuals and businesses trying to make a living off adult content. Again, really good stuff to stress and say and suggest. If you're coming from the US in particular, it's a really good thing to note. Confusion is another pathway you can do. Confusion is posing as a normal user with reasonable questions in order to maximize wasted call time. Hi, I'm calling because I have a question about an issue as a card holder. Remember, this was the sort of stuff that I demoed, saying like, so I heard something about the Visa and the MasterCard and the Steam and the itch.io. What's going on with that? Because I want to buy something for my son. Like, you can do that style as well, although you don't have to play a full role like me. What you can do is say like, hi, so I'm a card holder and I don't know what's going on, but I've heard that like I can't buy video games like with my MasterCard. What's up with that? Like you can play it kind of dumb, but like kind of low key, just like not be as balls to the wall as I am. So example questions. Why can't I purchase adult content on platform? Why can't I purchase, this, lesbian comic on Patreon if one was banned or something? Can I purchase media that contains adult themes with my card? Why or why not? Thank you, Monarch, for the lurk. I'm concerned about a statement I saw MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, Stripe, etc. put out, and I have questions. And then from there, you can hammer on contradictions. This is really good for keeping the call going and merging the talking points merging the complaint and confusion aspects together. So, why is OnlyFans okay, but Japanese anime and manga retailers can't sell NSFW fiction? Why can AI companies advertise adult services on YouTube and use payment processor services, but, I can't necessarily pay for something that I'd like to on Patreon? Why can I buy, this Game of Thrones, for example, but I can't buy adult content with the same themes? One thing I want to stress, a lot of times these folks will, especially if you call Visa is the big one I see of this, a lot of times these folks will say, please email us, please email us, please email us, and please do not email them. As this states, PAYPROS will attempt to placate you by having you send complaints to an email address. Do not accept this, as those emails are much easier to ignore than phone calls. Waste time by claiming email doesn't work or that you already have emailed and have received no response. That's especially good to do since this campaign has been going on for so long. The wider campaign. I really stress, again, just don't send an email. Like, it's so much more effective in disrupting their day-to-day operations and sending the point, making the message clear, making your point. If you just call, if you keep calling, it sends the message that for you, this is an issue that you really care about, that it's something that really upsets you. So please don't email. Calls they take manpower. It's a real-time live thing that they have to engage with. It's something that requires their focus, their attention in order to respond to your call. So do not email. If they try to get you to email, try to continue the conversation by saying like, oh, I don't have email access right now or something. Or like, I emailed before and I still want to talk about this. It costs much more money to pay someone to pick up a phone and talk to you than to possibly pay for an email inbox they can delete without reading. Yeah, exactly. And I have heard like different theories about whether these emails are being read or not. And I think it's possible that they are, but imagine like how quick it is to skim through an email and be like, like send her upset about this, send her upset about this, send her upset about this, than it is to like take 10, 15 minutes talking to a real human being on the other side, like literally having to have a conversation. Like, it costs money. It costs a lot of money, and it requires a lot of people to like be able to fetch the amount of calls that are required. Get a complaint ticket. If possible, try to get a complaint ticket near the end of your contact. Hold on to these tickets and use them as an opening in future calls. Hello, I'm calling to follow up on a ticket from last week. That is also a really good thing to do to establish to call centers that you're a repeat caller. This is a repeat issue that you're concerned about. Now remember, be polite. Do not, under any circumstances, get aggressive or throw around threats, especially if they are actionable. If you are hung up on, simply use that as an opening for another call. When I would get hung up on from Visa in the summer, a lot of times like they would try to rush through the conversation with me and just hang me up. I would just call back and say, hi, I was asking a question about X, but I got hung up on. And then usually that was a signal to the next person taking my call, that they needed to not hang up on me. Like, it kind of basically the first call center worker that hung up on me was passing the buck to the next one. Avid Low Drinker, thank you for the follow. It was basically passing the buck to the next caller to have to sit there with me the whole entire time. So this is really good advice. Just literally call back. Don't lose it. If you are sitting there thinking like, now is my time to vent all my frustrations on call center workers, this is not the campaign for you. You should not be calling. Like, that's inappropriate. That's not okay. That's not what you should be doing. I'm not saying this because like I don't want to get canceled. I'm saying this because I really do feel for these call center workers. Like, they didn't choose these policies. They're not responsible for these policies. They're literally trying to do their jobs. It is just unfortunate that the company that they work for is not being respectful to their consumers. Call often. Call. In order for a pressure campaign to be effective, pressure has to keep up over a long period. Keep your number of calls manageable but consistent. 1 or 2 calls a day done consistently is what works. I would say, folks, if you are nervous about consistency, here's what I recommend. Have a time during the day when you know you have downtime and nothing to do, you're bored, just call one of them. MasterCard or Visa. I recommend really pressuring MasterCard because MasterCard is usually the one that kind of is, in my opinion, is the industry leader that really is especially aggressive in setting these policies, but both of them are de facto. Like Visa is also very censorious. But if there's one to call, I would recommend MasterCard. MasterCard is the one that's kind of squealing a little bit and is squealing like a pig a little bit more under pressure. Visa is just kind of letting MasterCard take the hit sometimes. So I would call MasterCard if you can only make one call a day. That's my advice. Personally speaking, what I would also recommend folks as well is I mentioned finding downtime during the day, and downtime can be much more convenient than you realize, right? It can be like you're in between making breakfast and you have nothing to do while you're waiting for, like maybe your eggs to settle, or maybe, making pasta or something and you're waiting for the water to boil. Maybe you're going for a walk and you've got nothing to do. So why not call MasterCard? You might as well. It's just going to be a few minutes and you're going for a walk anyway. Maybe you are at work and you're on your lunch break and you're looking for something to do and you're bored. You can make a call then. Maybe there's downtime at work and your boss allows you to take a personal call. You can do it then. All those sorts of instances are really good. Squeal. Who's up squealing? I really recommend look for opportunities to take a call and just slot it into your day. It's just part of your schedule. You wake up, you make a call, you brush your teeth. You are about to go to bed, you make a burp, you make a call, you brush your teeth. Hi, Burp Down. How are you? It's good to have you. Look for those opportunities to just slot a call into your day. It will feel natural quickly. It will feel natural. It will be just a part of your day. And you might call more than once as a result. You might make multiple calls in a day. There'd be some days during the summer where I had nothing to do that day. It was like my off day. And so I just picked up the phone and called a couple times. A lot of times when we talk about things like this, folks sit there and they say, I have a lot of call anxiety though. What can I do? So first of all, another really good thing you can do in tandem instead of emailing is sending a physical letter. So letters are also a viable way to pressure payment processors. You do not need to include your own address as the sender on a letter. As of calls, try to send letters often. So I've had folks in here who say I have crazy call anxiety, but once a week I could send a letter. I can do that. So understand for folks here, if you have call anxiety, once a week send a letter is a really good alternative. Physical mail is much harder to deal with than email. Email is like, it doesn't really have matter attached to it. You can just delete it. Physical mail, you have to, shuffle through it. Make sure that what's exactly in the physical mail, because extra effort is put in snail mail by nature of it being sent. Look at what's being discussed in the mail. They have to, the mailroom has to go through it. Getting a lot of physical pieces of mail sent to MasterCard or Visa would have a sizable impact. So keep in mind that if you are concerned about calling, it's completely fine to just go ahead, write a letter. That's completely fine. The other thing I would say too is for folks here that have call anxiety but really want to call, I would definitely look up exposure therapy practices. It might ultimately not be easy for you if you have a lot of call anxiety or social anxiety. This just might not be something you can do. But I will say that usually the first call or two you're going to be very anxious, but by the 10th or 15th call, it will start to feel second nature. Your body will get used to it and realize there's no danger. You're talking to someone who's basically reading off a script, and as long as you're not yelling at them, there's not really going to be any judgment or yelling or snapping back at you. So understand that if you have call anxiety, this could be a really good opportunity to try to fight that call anxiety for a good cause. Look up some basic exposure therapy practices and strategies. Just try to take a short, small call once a day or once every other day and see if you're able to expand your comfort zone from then. I think a lot of times when this call anxiety conversation comes up, people will just say, write a letter. Just write a letter. Just write a letter. And it's completely fine to just write a letter. But it can also be a good opportunity to challenge yourself. So that's what I would say to folks who have call anxiety. I do have call anxiety, but as you saw during the summer, I was on my anti-anxiety meds then, so it's super easy compared to now. I have a lot more call anxiety off of my meds. I even then when I was on my anti-anxiety meds, I had a lot of call anxiety, and over time it just went away because they just kept doing it. So. If you play gotchas, you can just slot in while you do your dailies, double dailies. That's a really good idea, Sarah. That's a really good idea. So yeah, I'm going to encourage folks here. If you're from Twitter or Blue Sky, doesn't matter. Please share that infographic we just went through, there's the Blue Sky post. Let me find the Twitter post really quickly. This is really important to share because today is November 1st. We are in the thick of it now officially, but the goal is to get the word out that we are back on the calls. We are back on the phone. We are back on the lines. So we really want to also get the word out and stress that like this is happening. This is happening. Everyone, please get back on the phones. So please, whether you're on Twitter, whether you're on Blue Sky, those two links, please go to them and share them. It will do wonders if you retweet them on your respective platform. So that's what I'm gonna say to that. So yeah. Other than that, I'm going to go through some news in the payment processor censorship kind of world. There's a couple things I want to go over. I'm going to keep this stream relatively short. As you guys can probably tell, I'm very tired. I'm not going to lie. I think Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday is not the winning move for my schedule. So I'm probably going to tweak my Twitch schedule again. I don't think 11 a.m. is a winning time for me. I could just sense that my Saturday streams usually get canceled. So I'm considering maybe switching Saturday to Sunday, just putting out the 6 p.m. Eastern time slot like I normally stream. And I really feel for all my European viewers, but it's just too hard. It's just too hard for my Euro viewers to have the energy at 11. So I'm probably going to change the schedule around a little bit, but yeah, we'll continue going through some censorship update stuff. But the first hour was, I would say, the meat of what I really wanted to talk about. You also did like 5 streams this week. That's true. That's true. I'm like telling myself I also have to start. I'm going to have to start managing my streams a little bit better. Like I have the scheduled streams and maybe do one gorilla stream. That's it. Like you do not do that. Don't burn yourself out. Thank you, Chet. Yeah, I gotta take this weekend off. I'm not gonna lie. All right. So, one other thing I want to talk about is I have this on reader mode because I wasn't sure if like there's gonna be some stuff that's Twitch TOSable on the Shame Games website, but I want to talk about this developer named Shame Games, who was recently pulled from Patreon. It was pretty bad. Let me just look at all the images here really quickly. Okay, cool. Yeah, Shame Games was recently pulled from Patreon, and it's not looking great the way that Patreon handled this. So I want to talk about it a little bit. I want to go over it. This has been kind of like no one's really talked about this much, but obviously it is a big deal that it happened. I did do 5 streams this week. It's true. There's one of Ember. There is a Monday stream. Tuesday. ASMR Thursday was Sex Ed. And they took off Friday. So, Shame Games, just for you guys who don't know, is an adult game developer that was on Patreon. They're like a studio, essentially. And they've had a couple games published. And they recently had their Patreon just pulled. So we're going to read over their post explaining this, and I'll talk about it a little bit. So Shame Games wrote in his blog, "Our beloved trust and safety team at Patreon have deleted our accounts without warning, without communication, including to the support ticket we made over 24 hours ago, and without a final payout." This blog post was from Halloween, by the way, so just a heads up. "We don't know why, but we are not holding out much hope for any kind of reasonable appeals process based on what has happened to similar creators in the past. Shame Games can suddenly not pay our staff. Not only is this devastating to Aika and their family's ability to pay their mortgage and bills, Aika has 2 small children, if you didn't know, so thanks Patreon, but other people who relied on us are in similar positions with rent and so on. There can also be no new art drawn for the game until this is resolved, and by resolved, we mean that the vast majority of the nearly 1,000 subscribers we just lost on Patreon rejoin us over on Subscribestar. This is brutal, it's horrifying, it's causing panic attacks, but we will endure and we will recover. But we desperately, desperately need to do so as soon as humanly possible. And so to that end are experimenting with a new subscription incentive, limited edition content." So they go in a little bit more detail about what that is as follows. So Shame Games, essentially guys, what happened with them is that They weren't given a specific reason why their Patreon was pulled. They weren't given a specific reason why that happened. It just did. They just woke up and found out that Patreon pulled them and won't explain why exactly without their final payout. So as you can imagine, this is really devastating to like the business's ability to actually make an income. They don't have an income right now. Like, they just don't. They need folks to move to Subscribestar. And unfortunately, what happens in these instances, I think a lot of folks that have not done like any kind of like content creation work like this in the past, when you switch from one platform to another, you lose subscribers. Like, that just happens. I think when I switched from Fansly to Subscribestar, a lot of people did move with me to Subscribestar, but I probably did lose about like maybe like $50 to $100 in the process per month. I did ultimately have a lot of fans move over to Patreon or Subscribestar, but not all of them did when I left Fansly. Some folks also stayed around on Fansly and are still paying me, which is like, that's great, but please please save your money and go to like Subscribestar or Patreon. The rates are actually a little cheaper, I believe, now on those sites compared to what Fansly was offering. Yeah, Shame Games is in a really tough position right now. It's really unfair. They're just not being told exactly what happened or why. And, you know, this kind of reinforces what I've talked about with Patreon before, which is just Patreon can do this. Like, Patreon can do this if it wants to. Patreon can just come in and say, yep, we don't really like your content. Bye-bye, with no explanation. As I've mentioned before, I'm very afraid of this style of censorship emerging more and more and more towards ASMRists. I'm afraid, you know, I can't really find anything that Shame Games has done that would like set off the Patreon radar. And so obviously if this is happening to adult game developers more and more, I'm also nervous that this is going to happen more and more to ASMRists as well. So I think VTubers and voice actors should be paying close attention to this. Can't wait for the move to Riot models, Homer. Oh man, that's crazy. You're not wrong though. Get the fucking Ember treatment. Oh, you could be on Riot models though. You could further separate your audience. So very scary, but there has been a lot happen this week, and this was something that particularly upset me because, again, it's just a sign that Patreon doesn't respect adult developers. Patreon doesn't respect adult content creators, and it could be you. Like, I hate to say it, guys, but it could be me one day. Like, I could just wake up and find my Patreon's gone. So, and, you know, remember, one of my most milquetoast, safest ASMRs did get pulled from Patreon once. And the only reason it came back was because they had a connection to press. Oh, wow. Eat your content creators. Yes. Meanwhile, as well, while this censorship is happening, I want to talk about...
Boy.
Wow. Eat your opponents. Yes. I want to talk about, meanwhile, in Canada... Canada's age assurance debate heats up around Bill 209. This is from Biometric Update. So, Bill S209, excuse me. So, Bill S209 is running through the Senate right now in Canada on a national level. And this was flagged to me by... who flagged it again? I want to give a quick shout out because they've been doing excellent work on this stuff. This was... No, streamer mode, turn off, please. This is not helpful. This was actually flagged to me by Onyx Nuva, who's been doing a lot of good work, like just keeping an eye on this stuff, even as, you know, some attention has faded away. So Onyx flagged this for me, and I looked into it a little bit, and, you know, sometimes when these sorts of bills... sometimes when stuff around PAYPRO or legal censorship is flagged, like, I don't talk about it because I don't think it's like something that, like, there's a finite amount of attention that everyone has, and so I like to be very measured and deliberate in what I bring to people's attention. Like, you know, Veracia being banned, I only talked about a little bit the one time that she got banned in September. I talked about a lot more today because it's been happening multiple times. In the same way as well with Senate Bill 209 in Canada, this is something that I think people should be paying attention to because it's going through a lot of committee meetings right now. It literally just all October, meeting. They had a ton of meetings around it. And so I'm going to read this article that goes over it a little bit. Hello, Raven. Good to have you, my lovely mod. I hope you had a lovely Halloween. So, this is from biometricupdate.com. Canada's age assurance debate heats up around Bill S209. Legislation gets OPC endorsement, but legal experts raise flags about scope. Age assurance for pornographic content online is likely coming to Canada, and the debate over it has already arrived. Bill S209, an act to restrict young persons' online access to pornographic material, is the sequel to S210, a similar bill that passed the Senate in 2023 but got mired in bureaucracy until the government reset, sending the process back to the drawing board. The reanimated bill is causing significant consternation among Canadian privacy advocates, but winning support from the country's privacy watchdog. In comments to the Standing Senate Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs, LCJC, Privacy Commissioner of Canada Philip Defrance has endorsed Bill S209 and declared that it, quote, it is possible to implement age assurance mechanisms in a privacy protective manner. The declaration, which echoes the findings of the Age Assurance Technology Trial commissioned by the Government of Australia, follows an exploratory public consultation on age assurance by the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, OPC, which solicited input from privacy and industry stakeholder groups, civil society, academia, technology policy think tanks, and more. Dufresne, Dufresne says the responses reflect the, quote, significant public interest in and importance of a well-considered approach to age assurance. Now, his office is developing guidance on implementation, demonstrating confidence in the ultimate success of Bill S209. Dufresne had previously expressed concerns about data retention and misuse, but says those have been addressed in the latest version, noting that the added requirement to limit the collection of personal information to that which is strictly necessary for the age verification or age estimation has enhanced the bill from a privacy perspective. The OPC's general stance on age assurance amounts to cautious optimism. Dufresne concedes that determining the precise scope of the bill and its actual operation is a delicate task, but says his office is ready to help and needs to be involved. Should the bill be adopted, it will be important for my office to be involved in the review of regulation drafted by the government, and we will be ready to assist in any way that we can to ensure that privacy and the best interest of young persons are protected in the implementation stage of this bill. So I'm going to go down a little bit. The bill's preamble claims that online age verification age estimation technology is increasingly sophisticated and can now effectively ascertain the age of users without breaching their privacy rights. The bill, however, contains no specifics on how the government will practically balance privacy and protection. Instead, it mentions the development of regulations for carrying out the purposes and provisions of the bill. Where is it? Over here. But as long as there is leeway in the language of the law, the risks remain, not only in terms of data retention, but also overreach. On his blog, frequent commentator on copyright and privacy issues Michael Geist raises the alarm over statements from Bill 209's sponsor, Senator Julie Mivelen Deschanel, which indicate a broader scope for the law than pornography. Miville Deschanel says, Bill S209 does not just target porn platforms like Pornhub, and that the full scope of application is in the hands of the government. So the government could decide to include social media like X in its choices. Geist calls this an explicit declaration from the bill's sponsors that there are few limits on government power to require internet sites to institute age verification requirements or face the prospect of mandated website blocking in Canada. He floats the possibility of age verification being applied for search or AI services that can be used to generate pornographic images, which include large language models like ChatGPT. Crazy that we're talking about censorship in GPT. This must surely spark reconsideration of what is a dangerous bill that could require virtually all Canadians to submit to age verification requirements in order to access commonly used search, social media, and other sites. So keep in mind that this is going through Canada. My feeling right now is people should be aware that this is happening. but I'm taking the same stance that I did earlier, which is that I mentioned earlier in the stream, which is essentially, look, I think this is something that people should be paying attention to. I think people should not panic yet until it starts to make further moves within the Canadian legislature. I think it's scary, but again, let's wait and see what exactly happens with this bill first. I would keep an eye on this one, though. I think, like, if there's a bill currently, if you're Canadian, this is a bill that I would start to get ready to call your representatives about. This is a bill that I would get ready to track very closely, because this looks like, it does look like nationally Canada is going down the path of age verification. And I think somewhat inevitably, unless there's significant resistance. It's pronounced Dufresne, if I remember correctly. It's a weird name to pronounce. Got you. I am so American. I'm so bad at pronouncing anything. Some of these names sound French, make sense with French being a prominent language in Canada. Yeah, French is very prominent in Canada, like, and especially in regions like, for example, Montreal. You had a good Halloween and now you're gravy-based, Raven. Hey, Wilma. Hello. I hope the Netherlands are treating you nicely. We're talking about Canadian age verification censorship right now. But yeah, like, when I've talked to Canadian content creators, I've told them this. I've said, look, I think this is something to watch. I would not, like, 5-alarm fire your social medias quite yet, but I think I would start to consider this is something that could be dangerous to you. So when I've talked to adult content creators in Canada, that's what I've told them. I've told them, hey, look, you should keep an eye on this one. This one's probably going to develop. It's probably going to get worse. So I would keep an eye on this one. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this one. I'm very nervous for Canadian, my Canadian fans, for, you know, my Canadian friends. A lot of my loved ones are Canadian, so I'm nervous that this is going to get worse, but. So, just something to watch, chat. Something to keep an eye on. There's a couple other things. I want to talk about Texas's age verification law, but this is something Diesel Brain highlighted, and I think is pretty important to highlight. So I want to talk about this because I don't think this Verge article is getting enough attention either. So, The Verge published this article, "Contentious Kids Safety Bill Might Be Getting Gutted and Nobody's Happy." And I think a lot of folks might look at this headline and say, oh, okay, well, this is talking about Kids Online Safety Act, and, like, we're chilling because, like, they gutted it. It's all fine. And it's really important to note that just because COSA got gutted doesn't mean that, like, on a national level, Americans here can, like, sleep easy. There's still a lot of potential concern about censorious bills coming back into play in Congress when the government shutdown ends. God knows when, but when it does. So, excuse me. Whoa. Oh, I need a subscription. That's right. Well, we're not going to do that. Whoops. What the? What? Firefox is getting so confusing, man. There we go. One of the biggest flashpoints for internet regulation, whoops, excuse me. Let me get this down a little bit. Oh, wait a minute. I'm so dumb. Oh, God, okay. Oh, this is paywalled completely? Okay, give me 1 second, chat. Okay, a little rant really quickly, chat. I really feel like, I understand, like, and I've been even an advocate for having, like, premium and paid walled content from journalistic outlets, but I think increasingly a lot of these journalistic outlets fail to comprehend, like, what they should be paywalling, you know? Like, what you should be paywalling is, like, analysis, criticism, features, like, not basic news reporting. Like, basic news reporting that people need in order to understand what's going on in the world, that should not be paywalled. But increasingly that is being paywalled. Like, increasingly that kind of content is. So it creates this situation where it's like, if you have money, you get the news, and if you don't have money, you don't get the news. And that's obviously problematic. Okay. Obviously that's problematic. So again, as much as I've even encouraged outlets to start to monetize their content this way and paywall it, especially like as a journalist, a lot of time, like strategically they're monetizing things that are antagonistic to like journalism as a public service op-ed, so that shit cannot be like in zeitgeist. Yeah, Internet Archive is particularly slow these days. I don't know why, but I just ran it through Archive today, so we're good. I use Firefox. I think Firefox is really good. I think it's streamlined overall, but also like I would recommend you have to. Okay, Mozilla is kind of fucking up Firefox with all the AI implementation they're trying to put into Firefox. It's really stupid. So in order to run Firefox at its best right now, you have to rip out some of the cabling on the AI stuff. But I agree with Homer. Firefox overall is better than Chrome. Chrome is a huge like waste of your computer resources, and it's just not great. Like it's if you're gonna use Chrome, use whatchamacallit, the specific version of Chromium without Google. It's like no Google Chromium. That's what I recommend. Yeah, Firefox, you have to like rip out a lot of the cabling that Mozilla is shoving into it in order to make it work well. Like, overall, I used Brave for a little bit too, and I think Brave is also a half decent browser. I think of it though as kind of like the Chuddy browser, because like the Chuds use Brave a lot. Like Brave is very popular with Chuddies. But I used to use Brave, and I switched to Brave for a little bit in 2019, I want to say, and I did have a positive experience with Brave as well before I ultimately switched right back to Firefox. Yeah, we can be neckbeards and use Tor. I feel like Chrome is like, no offense to anyone who uses Chrome, but like Chrome is like the normie browser. No Google Chromium is like advanced Chrome legend. Firefox is like, I'm concerned about my privacy, but like I'm still a little normie. And then like Brave is like, I'm a chud. Brave is like, I fucking love Kiwi Farms. Like that's what a Brave user is like. Never realized Chrome used that much power. It's worked well enough for me. Safari on Apple devices works all right. Oh yeah, I didn't even talk about Safari. I used Chrome for a long time and just went to Firefox in the last year. I just really like Firefox a lot. I do feel like Mozilla is kind of, again, like I think where Mozilla is now, the Mozilla Foundation is not where it used to be. It's a shame. It's a real shame. A contentious kids safety bill might be getting gutted and nobody's happy. Okay. One of the biggest flashpoints for internet regulation, the Kids Online Safety Act, is poised for revival, but possibly without the central feature that's kept people fighting over it for the past 3 years. Since 2022, supporters of KOSA have backed its plan to require web platforms to protect kids from a variety of online harms, imposing what's known as a duty of care. Ow, I got Celsius in my face. The Celsius droplets like came up to my face. Ow, 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 ow. Okay, I'm fine now. Like it got in my eye. Almost. Not quite, but almost. How do I do that? How do I get Celsius in my eye? What? Am I becoming like part Celsius? Am I like a Celsius slime girl now? Celsius, can you get me a partnership? That faction includes parents whose children have died after experiencing cyberbullying, becoming victims of sextortion, or obtaining illegal drugs online. They believe the prospect of new legal liability could make companies change their policies to prevent more tragedies, even as opponents raise concerns that it will lead platforms to over-censor content, including LGBTQ resources. KOSA died in the House after passing with overwhelming approval in the Senate last year, and it was reintroduced in the Senate in May, teeing up another fight. There was a lot of activism done against KOSA somewhat recently, so yeah, just highlighting that. Now these parents are hearing from congressional staff and civil society groups close to the process that KOSA could return to the House of Representatives with the duty of care provision removed. The rumored changes could amount to KOSA's core provision going out with a whimper, even as lawmakers are rumored to be planning a package of several kids' safety bills soon after the government reopens from the shutdown. Meanwhile, for some longtime opponents of KOSA, removing the duty of care could resolve a central concern they have with the bill, that it could incentivize social media companies to remove helpful and potentially life-saving resources for kids from marginalized communities. But the overall kids safety package could make that a Pyrrhic victory, placing the gutted COSA alongside bills with potentially similarly troubling implications for online speech. Basically, like, COSA itself might not be as bad as it could have been, but the aspects of COSA that have been surgically removed or aspects similar to it could emerge in other bills. COSA's duty of care would formally require platforms to take down legal speech to prevent kids from searching out any kind of content, but it would require services to mitigate certain harms on their platforms, including health issues like eating disorders and depression. That's long concerned civil liberties groups. Fight for the Future's Sarah Phillips says that rather than taking the risk that potentially harmful posts could slip through the cracks onto a minor's algorithmic feed, the simplest thing for a platform to do is to remove that content. Fight for the Future was particularly concerned with how COSA could potentially impact resources for LGBTQ youth at a time when gender-affirming healthcare access has been increasingly politicized, though several prominent LGBTQ advocacy groups withdrew their opposition to COSA after earlier revisions. When it comes to tech policy, you have to think about how the companies will act, not just what the laws say, Phillips says. Without the duty of care, COSA would still introduce new standards like a requirement that kids' accounts default to the highest level of protection settings available and limit features that aim to keep users on as long as possible, like infinite scroll. Phillips says these other aspects of the bill are things Fight for the Future could likely get behind, though so far all of the energy around the bill has centered on the duty of care. For supporters and opponents alike, the other requirements alone represent a far more modest change than COSA's sponsors envisioned. The original Senate sponsors of COSA insist the bill needs the duty of care provision. Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat, Connecticut, says in a statement, there is no appetite for watering the bill down. And Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican, Tennessee, says establishing a duty of care through the Kids Online Safety Act is essential to protecting our kids and giving parents peace of mind. But House Republicans, who were behind the bill's failure last year, could threaten to let COSA fizzle again unless the duty of care is removed or significantly altered. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican Louisiana, and Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Republican also Louisiana, did not put COSA to a floor vote last year after overwhelming Senate approval. Both worried about potential speech issues, with Johnson calling it very problematic and Scalise warning it will empower dangerous people. The message that COSA could enable censorship is resonating with a large swath of people, like you guys. Phillips says, and right now, I think Democrats are particularly failing in listening to what those concerns are, especially in this political moment where we're seeing so much censorship and so much alignment with big tech with this administration. Advocates expect COSA will be included in a package of potentially over a dozen online safety-related bills, which will likely be introduced in the House Energy and Commerce Committee after the government reopens. It will probably be joined by the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protections Act, COPPA 2.0, Sammy's Law, a bill that would let parents use third-party tools on social media sites to get alerted about harmful activity, and the App Store Accountability Act, which would require app stores to verify users' ages. Groups like Fight for the Future says some of the bills would introduce entirely new risks of digital surveillance and eroded privacy. The App Store Accountability Act, for example, could create the same privacy concerns as other age verification rules, chilling legal speech. Fight for the Future has also warned that Sammy's Law could invite increased surveillance of children online. Two parent advocates who spoke to The Verge say they're open to alternatives to the duty of care, should they accomplish the same goal of protecting kids from online harms without overburdening parents. But they're hesitant about whether that will come to pass. They're left steeling themselves to see a version of COSA that looks quite different from the one they have spent countless days traveling to Washington to push forward, and hoping not to be blindsided, says Maureen Molak, whose son David died by suicide after experiencing cyberbullying and compulsive social media use. So far, the bill sponsors have held COSA's text close to the chest. Molak says parents' input was very welcomed and accepted in the Senate, but the experience has been different in the House. In statements to The Verge, COSA's House co-sponsors and leadership for the Energy and Commerce Committee did not directly address what would happen with the duty of care. There is no single bill that can address all of the threats that children face, and we will examine numerous proposals that seek to protect kids. Daniel Kelly, a spokesperson for the Republican-led committee, said in a statement, "Thank you, Actual Dearus, for the lurk, by the way." COSA is still a top priority for House co-sponsor Gus Let me get this right. Bilirakis, Republican, Florida. His spokesperson, Summer Blevins, said in a statement, what a name, urging Democrats to reopen the government to focus on it, lol. Democratic co-sponsor and Florida Rep. Kathy Castor praised the Senate's reintroduction of the bill, which included the duty of care. I encourage House Republican leadership to spend more time listening to families who fear a watered-down COSA from the House and less time meeting with big tech executives who value profits over the best interests of kids, Castor said in a statement. Phillips sees politicians' framing of COSA as a comprehensive solution, as a cop-out from dealing with the core issues families are struggling with, like healthcare and childcare. A lot of issues that should be actually being addressed by Congress are not being addressed by Congress and are being presented as this is a big tech issue and we're going to get at big tech. Either way, the stop and start movement around COSA over the past few years has been challenging for parents who have devoted their energy and grief to pushing the bill forward. Deb Schmill, whose teen daughter Becca died from fentanyl poisoning after buying drugs via a social media platform, says she's put her heart and soul into advocating for COSA, including moving to Washington for 3 months. This is not only about our children's legacy, she says. It's knowing that if we fail and when we fail, other children die. And that's a lot of weight to carry. And so it's heartbreaking. It's frustrating. It's maddening to go through this process and see nothing come of it. Look, here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. I think when the government reopens, and who knows when it's going to, it's just been shut down for so long now. This is something that we are going to have to pay close attention to, because I think it is accurate to say that the government is going to reopen and they're just going to try to push through a lot of laws or bills that could really be bad for privacy online, free speech online, adult content creation online, sex work online. All again under the name of protecting kids, all under the name of like trying to keep the kids safe, but impacting adults in such an extreme way. I think that ultimately that is something that we are potentially going to face. That is something we're essentially going to face. Celsius Slime Girl ASMR, yeah. If it's gonna happen to anyone, it'll definitely be you, yeah. So true. Safari, by the way, I would add, Pat, if you're on mobile or an iPad, in general, like, I have found that Linktree struggles with mobile browsers a lot these days. So, I don't know. I'd try like different, if you're having issues with certain websites and with Safari, I would do the old like cycle in and out like different browsers and different platforms. Like if you're accessing things with Safari on desktop/laptop and also mobile, try a different web browser on both of those platforms and stuff like that. That's what I would suggest in those situations. Hi, small cute frog. But anyway, going back to the topic of this Verge article, yeah, I'm very nervous that what's going to happen is essentially stuff like the COSA might get gutted, but in the process, COSA might actually like there might be all these other bills that are like the politicians on a national level try to push through to get onto President Trump's desk. And so I think the moment that the government reopens, like that should be the sign to everyone here. That should be the sign to everyone here that we have to pay attention to all of the different various legislature and goals discussed in this article. That the moment the government reopens, we have to be watching like a hawk to see if there's a bunch of bad bills that could, censor adult content, that could censor, various platforms that could collect your data, your personal data in invasive ways. We have to keep an eye out for that stuff the moment the government opens. Like the moment the government opens, you should be in like, oh my God, like we got to pay attention to all the stupid fucking bills coming out. Especially this admin will do heinous shit. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know when the government's going to reopen though.